Okay, this is I Cochise for Cochise Wrong. Weighing on the weight classes, episode 11A. This is the preview to UFC 139, Mauricio Shogun versus Dan Henderson. I'm going to be previewing pretty much the main card of this event, so let's get into it. Light heavyweight bout, Stephan Bonnar versus Kyle Kingsbury.
This light heavyweight bout will pin two Ultimate Fighter alumni against each other, Kyle Kingsbury versus Stephan Bonnar. While only suffering one loss in the UFC, and that was his debut, Kyle Kingsbury has faced less than stellar competition. While his stand-up is lacking, he's a physically strong guy, and he's going against perhaps the slowest and least explosive light heavyweight fighter currently signed to the UFC in Bonnar. This has the makings to be one of those fight of the nights that is rewarded because it showcases each fighter's weakness and shortcomings in an entertaining fashion. Think Garcia versus Nam Phan. Due to the experience factor and the higher level of recent competition, I'm going to have to go with the unanimous decision win for Bonnar, but don't be surprised if a hard overhand lands for Kingsbury.
Middleweight bout, Cung versus Wanderlie Silva.
I'll make this brief. We all know that Wanderlie Silva's chin is cracked, but he can still beat Cung by establishing the clinch game fast and aggressive if he stays cautious, which is a lot easier said than done. The more Silva waits, the easier it is for Lay to start picking him apart, especially with his fantastic leg kicks. I'll admit right now that this is my inner fanboy talking, but I find something inherently wrong with a part-time fighter in his late 30s with zero title aspirations or extension of his legacy beating Wanderlie Silva.
Welterweight bout, Martin Kampmann versus Rick Story.
Until his upset against Diego Alvarez, Rick Story was under the radar. After that victory, his stock went up big time. Well, until his last fight, which resulted in a loss that really wasn't his fault. UFC Live back in June this year was headlined originally by Anthony Johnson versus Nate the Great, making his UFC welterweight debut. Then Rumble got hurt. Story was his replacement. Then Nate pissed hot the day of the weigh-ins, which was the day before the fight. Thus, he got fired from the organization altogether. So the replacement at the last minute for Nate was Charlie Veneman, a fight in which Rick Story lost. His opponent, Martin Kampmann, has always been just under the cusp of the welterweight title contention. The loss to Paul Daly sticks out like a sore thumb. However, his last two fights, both being losses unfortunately, had him looking in a much better light against Jake Shields and Diego Sanchez. The techno-grappling and the crisper striking will make this a long night for Rick Story. I have to say that the fight won't enter the third frame.
The main event, light heavyweight bout, Dan Henderson versus Mauricio Shogun.
Since his last UFC appearance, Dan Henderson has become not so much a one-dimensional fighter as he's become a one-move fighter, the big right hand. In that limited arsenal, he has found great success as of late. For a fighter that has won a belt at middleweight, that weight class has not held the best results for him then or now. In this light heavyweight bout, he will take on Mauricio Shogun. Although he has wins over jiu-jitsu masters like Bustamante or ferocious strikers like Wanderlie Silva, guys with a combination of subs and striking have given Henderson problems in the past. Losses to the Nogueiras, Ricardo Rona, or even his victories over guys like Kuzmar Parhares, his first fight with Babalu, and even his recent bout against Fei Zhao lead me to pick his opponent in this fight. Shogun, riding off a win over Forrest Griffin that didn't really prove whether or not he was back after the loss to the now light heavyweight champion John Jones, should have the upper hand in this bout. We all know that Hendo beat Fedor, but how much does that weigh today really? And the way it was won did leave the door open for cries of an early stoppage, as well as not answering the question if Hendo has become way too reliant on his powerful right hand. In MMA, it's difficult to avoid one move for 15 to 25 minutes. That said, Shogun's wider weaponry and takedowns from the clinch should be enough to sour with a former Olympic prospect's second return to the UFC.
Okay, guys, I'm picking Stephan Bonnar, Wanderlie Silva, Martin Kampmann, Shogun in the main event. Now, there's a fight I did want to talk about, but I realized I have not seen enough fights to make a judgment on it. That was the Uriah Faber versus Brian Bowles fight. And the thing is, to be honest with you, I have not really watched that many bantamweight fights in the UFC. Not because I think Japan's bantamweights are better. I find that those fights are kind of entertaining. I think it has a lot to do with the production the production style of the UFC. Now, for those who don't know, have never been to an event live, UFC, boxing, pro wrestling, all use these camera angles to make the canvases look bigger than what they are. Now, the octagon is already huge as is. So I think the thing is the way that the production style of the UFC does, they have these wide angles inside the octagon. In the WEC, the cage was a little bit smaller, similar to the StrikeForce cage. And the thing is, most of the fighters in those organizations were smaller all around. I remember one time, I can't remember the exact card, but I saw these two light heavyweights fight, and then right after that was a bantamweight fight. And just from the camera angles alone, I mean, these guys look really, really tiny. So for some reason, I don't know why, I haven't been watching that many Brian Bowles fights as well as any of the UFC bantamweight fights. I want to change that, and I'm going to change it starting with UFC 139. To be honest with you, I'm kind of leaning on Brian Bowles only because he's faced stiffer competition as of late and had better success than Uriah Faber. Uriah Faber, ever since the Mike Brown fight, he's been kind of hot and cold lately. Other than that, guys, take care.